Welcome back, everybody. Armored Core 6 is out. It's been 11 years since Armored Core 5, which is pretty crazy when you think about it. Also, hello, Matt.
That's me. Hello.
Yes, it is the first Armored Core since Fromsoft have became modern Fromsoft, which sure is something. And according to Bandai Namco's Europe CEO, they basically think that this is an opportunity to turn Armored Core into a big series of games for the modern audience, right? Not on par with Elden Ring, he said, but way bigger than previous Armored Core games. And it actually does seem like that's happening. Even just to quickly skim through critical reviews, they are all very, very positive, broadly speaking. A few aren't. We're going to talk about the criticism and the filter and the posture bar soon. Public response has also been pretty damn good. They were the third the top sellers in Steam, coming in just behind Baldur's Gate 3 and Starfield, which I think, yeah, that's a reasonable enough result. Those games will both be doing absolutely massive. 147,000 concurrent players was its max, which is actually just ahead of Dark Souls 3. It's a little bit below Elden Ring's, which was 953k. So, yeah, you know, maybe need to 4x its number to hit Elden Ring, but I don't think there was ever any chance it was going to be close to Elden Ring.
There was never any hope or chance or anything, mostly because it's a different series, but also it's a mecha game, which just has a smaller audience in general in fantasy. Anything has proven that over time, I think. But as I tweeted when I saw this, like, we used to pray for times like this. People who like these kind of games. This is such an unbelievable result for a game like that. That was so niche and so kind of, yeah, this is great and it's interesting and it's fascinating, but it's never going to be like actually penetrate the market. And now with the weight of Elden Ring and Dark Souls behind it, people went, FromSoft, oh yeah, maybe I will branch out and try a different genre. And then obviously this resulted in 150k players, which is like just on PC. God knows how much on console, because it's traditionally more of a console game anyway. Same with most of like FromSoft stuff for in the earlier days. It was like most of the audience is likely on console, so you're looking at big numbers there as well, which I think is just, it's such excellent news. Even if there are some negative reviews on Steam that open with, I bought this game because of Elden Ring, there's mecha in it, negative review. Like,
of course there was one of those.
Yeah, and it didn't even seem tongue-in-cheek. It was just like, yeah, sorry, there's mechs in this game. Like, yeah, it's on the front page. It's called Armored Core.
On our game Pale Beyond, we had, it wasn't a review, but it was a refund note for somebody who accidentally purchased it and they thought that they were purchasing Sons of the Forest.
How do you get dressed?
Yeah, exactly. It'll be interesting when we get into it. Now, the sort of broad criticism, so we're at an 83% on Steam, which is a very good result, but it's not cruising at like the high 80s or the 90s, maybe like some other titles were. In terms of the complaints, right, there are some frustrations from people that essentially some things have been dumbed down, streamlined. Basically, you do not have as much, like, you know, total amount of customization possible. Also technical concerns, right? Crashes, problems with that. Like if you have a PS5, it might actually be better to run the PS4 version instead of the PS5 version, because of course it's a FromSoft game, so it's probably a tech nightmare in some way. Then there's also the way that bosses play out, with one of them being considered, it's considered to be a filter, though getting into the specifics of that is actually where things get interesting. And then the stagger bar, because stagger bars are the thing now.
There's something very interesting happening with, I think, video games in general, where I saw someone tweet about Armored Core saying Armored Core 6 is FromSoft's apology for leading the entire game industry down the iframe dodge roll gameplay path. But also because they were the ones who kind of, and now they weren't the first to come up with it, obviously, because a couple of games came around with a stagger idea at the same time. Obviously, Poise has been there for a long time, but Sekiro was like one of the first games they released that popularized the stagger bar. And then just shortly after that, Jedi Fallen Order had the same idea, more or less. Just the two dev teams, different side of the world, making similar kinds of games, had the idea. But then obviously they're like, okay, there's a stagger bar in Armored Core 6 now. You're like, FromSoft, stop doing this. Stop deciding the entire industry's trends, even though you're doing a reasonable good job. People are like, it doesn't really fit in Armored Core. I think it does mostly, but I can see why people are a little bit concerned with it.
Really, I think there's no way to continue but to talk about the filter. There have been filters in FromSoft games for a very long time. I think in the Souls games, like being, I think, very fair but very punishing, but also not being like insanely fast paced. They had a filter that people could kind of get around. Sekiro, I think that had this like sheer mechanical filter because of like the pace, the intensity of the gameplay. Right, the filter helicopter then.
Literally the tutorial boss.
Yes.
It's literally the first thing you fight that has teeth, the first thing that is a boss. And I've seen people say the game doesn't teach you mechanics at that point. It definitely does. It definitely says, here's the buttons to shoot. Here's what you're supposed to do. I've seen people say that doesn't happen, which is just literally not true. But it's the internet. People go on it and tell lies. But it's literally like the thing is you're in this area, this helicopter shows up and it just starts bombarding you. And it is the trial by fire. It is here's the Capper demon from Dark Souls. Here's, I guess a little bit later in Sekiro, but here's Genichiro. Here's if you don't understand this game, you're going to have troubles until you do understand it. And this works with how Armored Core is a lot faster at restarting than basically any other Fromsoft game, even old Armored Cores, where it's restart from checkpoint, you're in the boss, full health, full resources, you can go. Right. So it's a little bit more of that like hyper quick, almost like the thing popularized by Super Meat Boy way back when, which was if you have zero like time to get back in, people will go and go again. But the thing was like the game kind of didn't tell you specifically that the design intent is for you to jump, make your way over, like jump onto the thing beside you, because there's like basically a bunch of terrain you use as cover from the missiles. Use the terrain as cover from missiles. When the missiles have hit the cover, jump up, use your assault boost, which you've been taught about, which is this like fast-paced thing to go over, assault boost, kick, you wouldn't have the kick at that point, but then laser blade, because you've got the, I think, yeah, it's the pulse blade, I think is when you start with, and it's literally like you hit the thing with the pulse blade a couple times and it goes down.
Oh.
But
that's the great filter. Yeah,
but it's very hard to actually figure like that. It's literally almost like you need to have the right gameplay answer to this boss, because otherwise it's an AC helicopter. It is just as the image is just, it's just foom 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 foom. Opportunity to not get hit is kind of hard there. So you're taught immediately you have to be extremely mobile. You have to have your boost on. You have to quick boosting everywhere. And this isn't a game with iframe dodge rolls. This isn't dodge through the missiles. This is get away from the missiles, which is kind of obvious if you've played an Armored Core game.
Yeah, so
but if you're playing Sekiro, you're expecting to like dash through the missiles. You can if you go the right angle, but if you get bodied by the missiles, you're going to get bodied.
Yeah.
And your ranged weapons, which you have, don't do an awful lot of damage because it's a heavily armored helicopter. You're supposed to use your mobility to get in and kill it. But
so they're quite straight up saying to the player, you have terrain, you have a boost, you have to close distance. Figure it out.
Exactly. And they do that at first because you have no customization at that point. It's literally the tutorial mission. So it is just, here's a primer on gameplay mechanics. Here is a stage 1 boss that will teach you how to play. And people not being told how to play has resulted in a lot of like negative feedback from people playing in a different way and not expecting it. Which is obviously, it's kind of, if players are bouncing off their game, it's their fault. But this is the entirety of FromSoft's like approach, where they are, realistically speaking, pretty unforgiving with their design, and people usually get over it. It's just in this, it seems to be people are less enjoying the process of getting over it because they're expecting to play a more traditional FromSoft game.
Well, do you think there's something there to do with like intuition? Because you look at any of their other games and it's like, I have sword and board, I have two-handed sword. People kind of know, like, light attack, heavy attack, enemy swinging. It's all, it's very simple, right? Like that was the thing with Dark Souls. It was simple but very punishing. That meant that everything meant a hell of a lot. So it had that like great sense of causality. Whereas here, perhaps people wouldn't be able to as readily intuit how to solve a situation when they're a giant mech if they've been more used to like standard sword and board Dark Souls.
I think that's ultimately most of the issue with the filters in this game, is because the game does introduce different mechanics and different ideas to you. It is designed, it's not just slapped together. And it's just people are like, these are walls that people have to climb over themselves. And sometimes that, like you say, the intuition stuff is like, because obviously I played a couple of the other Armored Cores when I was younger, and obviously like I kind of remember a little bit, oh yeah, I know how to play a light mech. I know how to like just strafe this gunfire, dash back through the gunfire once it's finished to dodge the incoming missile barrage. It's like if you're someone who's playing like a DS Combat game or anything else, is like, okay, well, you understand a missile's coming and it's a homing missile. How do you dodge that? And a Dark Souls player who's never played like anything like that might go, well, if I just dodge through it, because a dodge is a dodge.
You barrel roll through the missile.
Yeah, so obviously it's like, well, this is a home missile, it's coming towards you. So what do? You go kind of, it's coming this way, so you go that, it goes behind and hits behind you. Or depending on the speed of the missile or the tracking of the missile, you kind of learn these things and go, okay, well, I know how to dodge that missile barrage because I see where it's coming. And the game does have like sound effect cues and visual effect cues. They're just a little bit lost in the fact that this is a really heavy, really like gray and blue game.
Yeah.
And it's just sometimes a little bit challenging to see because I literally, I'm not going to say who it was, but I saw there was someone on Twitter who was like, they basically documented their process of getting horribly filtered and then learning. And they were so mad at it. They didn't understand a single thing that was going on. They were confused. They didn't know where the damage was coming from. They didn't know anything. And then they were just like, oh yeah, I see the red flash. That is your ACS saying target lock on you. So there is all that warning of, okay, there's attack coming in. These missiles are coming in. That's all there. It's just, it seems some people are a little bit too, not paying attention enough to go, okay, well, let's actually approach this like it's a proper problem.
Well, I think it's a thing of pace. So like Dark Souls, slower pace. All right, that's kind of a thing in Dark Souls. Bloodborne, like a little bit of a faster paced. Sekiro, very fast. Very, very, very fast. And at least like from my experience playing it, like Dark Souls is easier. To me, anyway.
Oh,
right. It's like, it is just like fundamentally easier than Sekiro. Sekiro is like way harder. And the thing with Sekiro is like, you start, and because you already know the language of an iframe dodge game, you start playing Sekiro using your dodge roll. Sekiro is not designed for you to use your dodge roll. It's designed around the stagger bar, with the dodge roll, I suppose, being like a backup option to maybe try to like get some distance so you can like re-engage maybe in your own terms a bit more.
Sekiro is very rock paper scissors when it comes to like the later game boss design, where this is a blockable, so you parry it. This is a unblockable, so you dodge it, or you get the Mikiri counter and it's like dodging in the right direction to stand on spear strikes and stuff like that. So it's very like prescriptive and kind of here's the couple things you want to do.
And that's where it's interesting. I remember, I think it was Lady Butterfly. It was like the first boss?
Madame Butterfly?
Madame Butterfly.
Yeah.
Like I was able to use rolls and stuff to kind of get around her fine. Then you get to the boss that's just flat out like, no, this is designed for the stagger system. This is designed for parrying. You will do that. And if you are a player who sort of, you like leaned back in your prior experience of like the Souls games, you would just get completely annihilated, because all that like time where you were really ideally learning stagger, learning parry timings well, what happens? Oh, you didn't do that because you dodged instead. Whereas I suppose here, like it's harder to intuit. It's very three-dimensional.
Very three-dimensional.
So I'm thinking about the, it's like cognitive load, I suppose. This is like a very fast-paced, very high cognitive load game. And in my head, the thing that was so successful about Dark Souls is that it was a punishing game with low cognitive load. I think with Sekiro, you then get a still very punishing game, higher cognitive load. I've got to wonder here, it's that thing of like, what makes somebody stop playing Dark Souls because they died and get angry? I mean, it's going to be whenever they feel overwhelmed. I think the reason why then Dark Souls ended up being, like hard, it was hard but fair. Whenever people died, they kind of knew what happened. I think same with Sekiro in a lot of cases, although I think players would bounce off Sekiro if they were like trying to do parries. Their parry timings aren't really working out. They can't exactly understand why. Like that's going to make them more frustrated. I then think here, even the thing of like, you can miss some of those like core notifications, even though they're quite clearly there, but just because cognitive load is humongous.
Oh, like if the one thing that if you aren't familiar with the game, you literally have 4 attack buttons. Like that's the thing. You have your shoulders and your 2 main hands. So you end up having to keep track of, and this is all like nicely done in your targeting UI. It's really pretty. You know when things are locked on, when you're reloading, stuff like that. But it is like, you're like, okay, well, I have 2 guns and 2 shoulder weapons and I have to use all of them all the time. And you're supposed to use all of them all the time because, well, maybe you're supposed to like maybe reload whenever you're getting close to staggering someone. But generally you want to hold your buttons at all times while you're dodging, while you're watching your energy bar, while you're watching the enemies, of which there are multiple a lot of the time. So it is a really overwhelming game. It's maybe one of the most exhausting action games I've played in a long, long time, which is saying something considering that's my genre. I think that's why I think it's really interesting how divisive it's ultimately going to end up be. But for people who click with it, they're going to love it to pieces because it is so unforgivingly Fromsoft in a way that I think like Dark Souls was. Maybe people won't find it as easy to ultimately get in, but it has all of the trademarks of this is extremely punishing. It's extremely rewarding for when you actually play it and learn the systems. And it also has all of that like extremely good world building and lore and story that all those games have as well.
So on that, right. Traditional FromSoft narrative, lighter touch, more in the flavor text, more in like the art design stuff that you sort of pick up. How are we playing out? In the way that like I know there's a lot of people they almost they want to play a game like a mini series. You know, just like sit down, I'll get like 12 hours of like good gameplay, crazy big story, and at the end I'll leave and I'll be happy. On those terms, how are we doing?
This is in the same way that the like other FromSoft games are. This is heavy. Like if you play this game without thinking about what you're hearing or what you're saying, you're not going to understand anything. It's not as between the lines because there's basically a lot of it is character dialogue. It's your handler Walter talking to you, 61. And then there's other characters come in and just like start talking to you, and things get strange and weird and interesting around the substance called coral that you're hunting for, that the game opens by the fires of Ibis wiped out this planet. It was coral that did it. Now you're on Rubicon 3 trying to get some coral, and the game's called Fires of Rubicon, so you can put 2 and 2 together there.
Plus it's a mech game, so
yeah.
It's obviously going to descend into some form of philosophical fun bullshit.
It's definitely more grounded mech. It's
okay.
That's the thing about mecha genre compared to a lot of other genres. They generally are grounded in pretty reasonable politicking. Now there's like the super robot genre where it is like, right, you're going to go kill Space God with a robot instead of, you know, just killing regular robot dudes. But a lot of it is rooted in like what people loved about the Gundam series, which obviously is one of the progenitors of like all mech in a way. And it's obviously like, okay, well here's war. War is bad, by the way. That like ancient image of it going overhead. War is bad. Wow, cool robot. It's that thing.
Yeah.
And this is very much that, where it's like all of Armored Core is, or at least since Miyazaki took over with, I think it was Last Raven, I think it was, and then 4. But it's all been, did you know that corporations ruin the world and the environment and make it all awful nightmares for everyone to live in? Yeah. Yeah, that's the game series in every way. But this one has a lot of like man melding with machine through coral and all this kind of weird stuff, and like interesting things that happen that you don't quite understand. And there's like a load of different endings and a load of decision paths based on which mission you do. Do you want to support the Rubicon Liberation Front or support the corporations because you're a mercenary? You can do whatever you want. There's questions about who you actually are as the player character. You're C4621. You like the opening is you narrowly escaping death in the entrance to Rubicon, because Walter's like, right, go to Rubicon. You're basically done for, but you'll earn some last bits of money here. So it's like really heavy and really fascinating, interesting. But again, it's not like a handholdy story. It's very interesting. I'm like nowhere near finished it yet, but I definitely will play all 3 times to get the final ending, because it's one of those games too.
Of course.
Yeah, which is why I think I love seeing so many people buy it. I love seeing so many people play it. And we haven't even talked about like the mech customization, which is one of the other great filters of the game, which is you play a Dark Souls game and you have your build, and your build will work most of the time. And it's really hard to get another build because you have to go and farm your Titanite shards and get your souls and, you know, respec your character, stuff like that. In this game, there's almost no cost associated whatsoever to getting new parts. You can just replay a mission that takes 3 minutes and get like 200,000, which is enough to buy a new gun. So you just do that and you can farm all the parts in like an hour or 2. Then you can freely swap them out as long as your build will literally work. Like you can't put massive heavy weapons on a light mech because it literally has the legs have a certain load, the arms have a certain load. Your generator can only produce so much energy before it gets heavier and bulkier and slower and stuff like that. So it is like very much, especially with the restart checkpoint. If you die to a boss, you can go into assembly, change your mech, go again. It takes a couple second stops. And that's a lot of the gameplay.
Oh, okay. Because in a lot of games, the way that would play out is you'd have to abort the mission, change your mech, get back to the boss again, and then you can use the checkpoints.
That was the way it used to be in old Armored Core games. Now it is restart from checkpoint with a new mech.
Oh, that's the design saying something quite clearly then.
Yep.
Right.
Yep, that's the design saying, maybe...
It's like Overwatch.
Yeah, maybe you do. Maybe you're fighting the big first. Now, obviously, there's some downsides to this, like the second great filter is the Chapter 1 boss, Baltius. He has this massive pulse shield. He stays at long range, which at this point, you've probably had more success being close range, like with a helicopter, where you go in and slash it up. But this guy stays at long range. If you get close, you get decimated most of the time. And he's got a pulse shield. Now, you probably didn't buy the pulse gun from the shop. The one that literally says, "This is for breaking pulse shields, by the way. Please buy us." If you didn't buy it, like I didn't buy it because I didn't really care, you will have to restart that mission again to go and buy the part. But if any parts you already have, you can swap out, which means you go, oh, well, I've died. Well, I'll try this instead. I'll try running dual shotguns, getting close, hit them, get back out. I'll try that. Or I'll try assault rifles and literally just strafe fire.
So one of the things that I had heard, because going through Steam reviews, look, man, there's too many games. As I've said before, too many games. This is also the worst time to fall into a co-op Minecraft hole. Because it's like, I mean, my default is I'm going to play this at the weekend. But Starfield, this is unfair.
Yeah, I am seriously struggling. I've only played a couple hours of Armored Core because I haven't had time. I think I'm like towards the end of chapter 3, and Sea of Stars is out now. And Sea of Stars is getting 95, and that's a Paper Mario Chrono Trigger game by the Messenger people. Like, cool. Two video games.
Is it 2007 people talk about?
2007 mostly.
Yeah.
I think that's the one of them, yeah.
I think we should do a video just being like, is this 2007 too?
It's 2007 on crack, as far as I'm concerned. Mostly because it's like, for me specifically, the past couple months have been like, sorry, do you want any semblance of a life? Do you even want to, like, it's like, do you want to just quit your job and play video games for like 6 months? I would kind of need to at this point, to be honest with you.
It's unbelievably relentless.
It's getting like all, as someone who identifies quite strongly as a gamer who plays all of the big games in culture, it is oppressively overwhelming. But Armored Core definitely sticks out as like the one I'm definitely going to give most of my time to, because this is special in a way that even like the Souls games are special, but Armored Core getting this much traction and this much love, and this game releasing today with this quality, with this budget behind it, with this marketing, is like I said at the top of the video, we used to pray for times like this. This is unbelievable.
I think, one of the hardest things in games is distribution. And I suppose one of the things that's happened, like more like tiny niches of people have kind of like been connected through content, right? I think content has been a lot of that. It's like, the content kind of like creates that like shared culture or whatever. And it's kind of meant that a lot of these previously like niche low sales things are actually now able to become very large blockbusters.
It's satisfying and gratifying in a way I can find it very hard to actually describe. How, like, as someone who grew up playing a lot of really niche games, it's almost literally life affirming in a way. You're like, yeah, all that shit that you know is cool, but the world largely didn't seem to agree all that much. It's like, no, you're right the whole goddamn time.
It's like even comparing, I know that talking about Elden Ring and Horizon Forbidden West, or was it Horizon No Sales, or all the jokes people were doing.
Horizon Zero Sales.
Horizon Zero Sales. That funny situation where like Horizon being that game that is doing all of the modern big game things, like with its UI, with all of its accommodations for approachability and accessibility, many of which are great. Like, to be clear, like a lot of the accessibility stuff is, is great. People like, they need that shit and it helps to play the game. It is interesting that we are getting AAA games that don't feel like that. Because when you think of a AAA game, you think of all of those UI element bells and whistles, right? Like it's like the texture, the feeling of a AAA game. Now we are seeing games. It's just like I don't want to be like, because words obviously they lose meaning, and so if I start saying, oh, it's like a AA, AAA, then like nothing makes sense anymore. But it is kind of like that thing of like, AA game. It's not actually doing all of those things that the really big, humongous games do, and that have like 8 trillion UX designers who collaborate to make a bloated UI with too many things on it. yet it is sort of getting that like AAA production value, maybe budget, certainly sales.
It's insulation. Insulation does that.
Yeah.
You look at Larian and Baldur's Gate 3, and they were kind of insulated doing their own thing for so long. Obviously, they had to grab talent from across the industry, of course, but it was still like they just did their own thing unforgivingly or unapologetically, and that turned out obviously incredible for everyone. Like, there's a game of generation, no big deal. But then for Armored Core, it's like, again, Fromsoft are sitting in their own little hovel, and Bandai Namco seem to have guards at the gate going, don't you dare let anyone in here.
3 to 4 years.
Yeah.
Is how long this took. And I suppose
that's unbelievable.
Yeah, you think about say the greenlighting process inside Blizzard Entertainment, like, you know, things wouldn't be greenlit unless they're, you know, $1 billion franchise or whatever. This is a game that was greenlit. Now, of course, this was greenlit like certainly after Elden Ring, I would imagine. But you know, obviously before Elden Ring, like the sales or whatever happened. But it seems like they always knew this would be a more niche title, yet they did do it anyway.
That's what I think is absolutely beautiful about like FromSoft being one of those who, because of the success of Dark Souls and how like obviously deserved, but also how kind of lucky they were and how the meme culture surrounded that and exploded into high heavens, how that happened again with Elden Ring, and Elden Ring been memed on for being in dev for so long, also worked for it. So it's like a combination of like, I guess it's luck and opportunity combined really well for them. But it's the fact that they're insulated and are doing what they want to do is why this feels like, obviously some people have issues with it not feeling quite as Armored Core-y as old Armored Core games, because there's a little bit of old like PS2 and PS3 jank that I think time has ruled maybe was good at the time but doesn't feel as good anymore. Like obviously your radar and all of the extra customization is streamlined now for it to make more sense. It's like, yeah, easier design, a cleaner game overall. But it's the installation that really gets me, because there's this tweet that's stuck in my head. It was from someone called Botster or PSX Rhythmith, and they said, youngsters being like, wow, you can just choose whatever color you want for your Armored Core. You don't have to unlock them first. That's so cool. In my stream chat made me feel sad. They're like,
no!
Yeah, you can just go in there and you can paint the whatever color you want. You can paint every single part of it completely differently. You've got a full RGB color wheel. You've got your hue saturation values. You've got everything. And also you've got decals, which have 128 layers of like pixel art on top.
If it was Destiny 2, like, so how many colors are in the RGB color wheel?
I'm sure someone knows the answer off the top of their head, but it is a lot. It is millions, like.
Yeah, so I'm just imagining like the millions of different microtransactions Bungie would make you go through to actually have all of those colors.
It would be a pre-order bonus. The digital deluxe edition would come with the pattern that you need to recreate something like White Glint. It would come with the colors for EVA Unit 01, because that's the first thing a lot of people did. But
of course, of course.
But what you have instead now, because this is all free, is there's a site with, because you can like shareable ID codes for decals and stuff and AC data, so people are like sharing their builds online. I think there's a weird thing where they're not cross-platform because computers are hard and FromSoft aren't that technically minded, it seems. But there's crazy stuff going on there, like it was Maximilian, the like FTC streamer, is a big old Armored Core head, and I can't remember what mech it was he started to make, but he was like, if I can make this mech in-game, this will be my favorite game of all time. And then he started doing it. He's like, I can't believe I can literally do this, because of the fact that they got some of like the biggest mechanical designers in mecha history on board with them. So they've got all of these parts and all of these colors and all these decals. There's a I can't remember what it's called, but like there's a set of like detailing bits going around where decals that look like nuts and bolts and screws and little lights and stuff that people were making, so you can kind of add a more gritty look to it. And it was all just this like, yeah, this is probably put well for audiences by the first response to that tweet, or the highest one at the minute, which is, I miss old Halo so bad. FromSoft are sitting in their little hermit cave going, we're going to make a game, and they were like, we're going to put colors in our game and you'll be able to customize it whatever you want and build whatever mech you want. And then maybe someone from some Bandai Namco executive team came in and said, that sounds quite monetizable. And then whoever Hidetaka Miyazaki was hired for bodyguards drop-kicked that executive out of the office, said, no, don't you dare come near our artists ever again. We have to keep them in a bubble, protect them so they can make things that people actually want to play and will have like a amount of childlike joy from. Because for Armored Core heads and for people who are like, for veterans and for people who are new and into it, this is gamer Christmas. We have had gamer Christmas after gamer Christmas this year from just, what do you mean this is real? go back 5 years and you couldn't have dreamt it. You would have had a dream about it and woke up sad that you would never see it. And now it's actually happening, which is crazy to me.
Yeah.
Although it's only 83 on Steam because filters, I guess.
Who's an elitist?
I am not an elitist whatsoever. I just think people should be willing to put a little bit of effort in. That's what I'd suggest.
There's certainly a question in how you design your onboarding ramp and what that means for what you're saying about your own game. And I think that's where I'm going to leave it. Absolutely. Because I think Fromsoft continually does make a statement. And by not having that very AAA, or like Western kind of like almost, focus tested onboarding experience, I think they're making a statement.
As they always do.
Yeah.
As they always do. They make a statement and everyone goes, that's a statement, and God, that's hot.
Yeah. So that's that. You have got a few days until Starfield, and I'm sure in a few days after that, there'll be some other humongous game of the friggin' decade coming out. So that's it from us. And we'll see you back in the channel tomorrow.